Welcome to the Snapshot. I am KM Best. I'm joined as always by Marvel Snap Phenom Brendan Patrick, and of course, Marvel Snap Phenom Lambyseries, the winner of the Creator Clash UK. So what we're going to be doing on this episode, we're going to be talking to Lamby about the Creator Clash UK, his thought process for the decks that he brought, because I think what he ended up on was the most well-rounded version of the bounce deck that basically exists entirely. I think if you're a listener to this podcast, you should probably already know who Lamby is, but you can find him twitch.tv/Lambyseries TV, and of course on Twitter as well. So, Lamby, how you doing?
Yo, KM, yo, Brendan, what's up? Great to be back on the podcast. Great to come off a huge win in Manchester. Flew a long way. I paid for my ticket in prize money, so everything is good.
Yeah, you were doing the crowdfunding, and then you didn't need it.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of profited, well, but it's because I won. so
yeah. What was your break-even point if you'd come in second?
Okay, so it's kind of crazy, but my flight ticket cost about $1,500. So that's crazy, right?
God.
So it's halfway across the world.
That's on the cheap end, to be honest, with how... Yes. I don't know how late you booked, but I booked reasonably late, and yeah, nowadays it's just absolutely crazy. Happy that you were able to win. Did you go X2 in Swiss, by the way?
Yeah, so I won round 1 and 2, lost 3 and 4, and then won round 5. So tiebreakers were good, but it was still a sweat on the final round. It was a bit scary.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll dive into that a little bit, but a little bit of mentality stuff there, sort of almost going on the break. You go 3-2 in Swiss and then end up going undefeated all the way to win the entire tournament. I know you were going into the content creator Clash of the UK. I know you were probably one of, almost certainly one of the favorite people to win the entire tournament. Both you and Moyen very, very high up, as well as many other players. But I know Lambyseries was somebody everybody had their eye out for. Yeah, I was happy to be able to play you in Swiss and then ultimately see you make that run top 8. I think you played one of the best matches that's ever been played on stream, by the way, against Den in your semifinals. It was a absolutely fantastic match, a nail biter, and it's a perfect example of playing to your outs, I believe. You just navigated the Doc Ock in Den's list specifically, just fantastic. And you saw Lamby sort of start the series off at one point, end the series off at a different point in terms of play style and just how Lamby was able to navigate exactly what Den's deck was trying to do and able to shut down bounce. I want to start it off, Lamby, though. Let's just talk about your sort of metagaming for the tournament, why you brought the decks you did. For the people listening, Lamby brought bounce. Effectively, for the audio listeners, what that looks like, I'll read off a little bit of list. This is the list that I brought. I think Lamby did not have the Shang-Chi, instead had Jeff, but that is Kitty Pryde, Bass, Spider-Ham, Iceman, Angela, Hitmonkey, Mysterio, Bishop, Beast, Shang-Chi, Ironman, Chavez, and then he also brought a lockdown high evolutionary deck that had cards like Storm, Spider-Man in it, more of an anti-bounce list. But anyway, I'm going to pass over to you, Lamby. Just talk a little bit about what decks you brought and how you landed on them specifically.
Okay, so like you mentioned, I brought the bounce deck and the lockdown deck, high evo lockdown deck. The main reason for this lineup is because I wanted to play bounce almost 100% because it's the best deck in the game, in my opinion, at this point in time. And I wasn't very keen on playing the bounce mirror. I mean, I knew how to win the mirror, but at the same time, it wasn't something I wanted to do because it could be very high rolly on either side.
They draw
Kitty, a complete blowout.
You don't draw Kitty. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool mirror.
Yeah. I think outside of Kitty, Bast in the opening hand is also crazy important. So I was trying to avoid that as much as possible. So the second deck I brought was, because I prepped with Browder, and we were just like concluding that, like, all right, we want to play bounce as much as possible. We don't want to play the mirror as much as possible. So how to do that? We decided to bring a deck that looks so scary to queue bounce into, which is the lane lockdown, high evo lane lockdown deck, because that one doesn't give bounce space to play stuff. Like, I mean, one of Bouncer's like worst nightmare is that like unplayable locations, right? So we created a deck that literally creates unplayable locations. So yeah, it was meant to, I wouldn't say that we were never going to play that deck because we wanted to play bounce, but there were very few people that we were actually going to willingly queue the the lockdown deck into. It's really more of just like a scare tactic, and it kind of worked out, especially in like my final, because D-Money didn't even queue his bounce because he was too afraid to play into my lockdown deck, which we actually never intended to play.
Yeah, and if you think about that matchup, I would say D-Money's bounce list is actually favored in the heads up, probably. And like that, like one of the things that I was thinking about, because I won't say I worked with Moyen, I was just like, we talked a little bit about lists, but like your lists were basically exactly what we figured the whole thing would look like, right? It was just like someone's going to take one bounce deck and then one deck with Evo in it. And that's how we ended up on the Electro thing, as I understand it, where it's just like, if you queued into that, would you not just be like, oh my God, I can't play either of these?
Yeah, so I mean, what a lot of players did, or I think what the most successful players of this tournament did, is they used their second deck. It was a 2-deck format. Used their second deck as a proxy deck in order to force their opponent to play favorable matchups into the deck they actually want to play in the tournament, which for a lot of players was bounce.
Like that's what's so fascinating to me, is because like I feel like if this is like a 1-deck tournament, the bounce players aren't as advantaged, but because they can force the unfavorables off, it's actually like, so like what was the process for coming up with that line of thinking when you put your lineup together? Is that just something you knew how to do from Hearthstone? How did you arrive at that being the appropriate thing to do?
I think firstly we had to acknowledge that most people knew what they were doing for the event, so people were going to arrive at very similar conclusions. What I was very confident of doing was I was very confident at playing the bounce deck. So like long story short, I'm quite a meta slave. Like I just love playing the best decks, and I feel like generally I'm more of a play the best decks and win person than play a counter to beat the best deck kind of person. So yeah, I decided to just like go with my usual comfort strat, play the best decks, and like I said, if the mirror was something that had like a lot of skill edge, I might not even have brought the lockdown deck. But it's a lot closer than some might think in terms of the mirror. Like the skill edge is there, but with everyone being good at the tournament, the skill edge is like a bit mitigated. So deck building and deck choices were a huge factor.
Yeah, I remember, speaking to the skill level of that tournament, I just remember when Ordinary Harry was walking by, I think we were about to queue top 8, and he was just like, he's like, the last tournament was a content creator tournament. He's like, this tournament, this is a fucking competitive tournament. He's just like looking at everybody. Yeah, I mean, I think that was sort of the right choice, is to expect people to prep for the event. There's also a key conclusion there that you sort of hit on, but I want to highlight, and that's that a lot of people would come to the same conclusion that bounce is the best deck. Not everybody did. Some people did show up with High Evo Lockjaw as sort of their premier tier 1 deck, and maybe didn't bring bounce, or not too many people brought High Evo sort of mid range or regular High Evo Lockjaw, and also brought bounce. They usually had one or the other. But a lot of people at this tournament prepped when they were prepping, found that bounce was just the overall best deck. And Cam is right. If it was a 1-deck event, it's actually completely different. If you're looking to prep for a upcoming open deck list 1-deck tournament, you can't even really use a lot of the deck lists that showed up in this tournament. You can use them to get ideas, but it's really not the whole picture, because there was a lot you had to consider. First of all, we were able to put certain tech cards in some decks, because you could put the Shang-Chi maybe in your bounce deck, and that it's more likely to queue into the High Evo Lockjaws, because people are going to queue that into your bounce deck. But also at the same time, we had to deal with one of the hardest deck building decisions I think of this entire tournament, which is where to put the Chavez. And contrary to maybe Twitter's popular belief, Chavez is actually a really good card. It's actually
Stop
a really, really
cutting Chavez. I am begging you.
I'm begging you. Stop cutting Chavez.
Well,
I'm begging you too.
You know what?
We almost ratioed him. Like both of us almost ratioed him with the same comment. We almost pulled it off.
I was saying, so people that weren't privy to it, I played back D-Money's list, who ended up getting second in the tournament, his bounce list. And I won Infinity Conquest with it, so I posted about it. And I didn't have Chavez in the list, so I ended up getting absolutely lit up on Twitter for a belief, like just basically defending a belief I didn't believe. I'm a big Chavez truther, and I don't know. Well, you guys, why don't you explain it, though, for the people that are listening to us and they're like, maybe they're on the fence about why is Chavez actually good? Because there's a lot of bounce players that will, they're coming up to turn 6. Maybe they didn't even get waived, right? They're coming up to turn 6 and they draw Chavez and they're like, I don't actually want to draw this card. This card seems bad. Why is Chavez good?
So
Right. So
you want
Shall
to
I
go?
go?
You,
Yeah,
you
I'll
go
go first.
Okay.
Yep. So the thing about Chavez, it's generally lets you play an 11 card deck, basically, because like if your deck relies on like doing things early, right? And like the actual turn 6 is not as important. Like I'm not saying it's not important, but like in order to even get to turn 6 and like win, you need to draw the early game, like your Kitty, your Bast. It's the same thing as like some people play Chavez in the Zabu Doom Wave deck, right? Because you want to get the Zabu, it's the same thing. So like you really, and especially for bounce, it's a lot of moving parts, like a lot of moving parts that have to come together. You really want to be able to see these moving parts as early as possible to dictate your game plan. I feel like there is, okay, the merit to not having Chavez is obviously you can top deck Hit Monkey, you can top deck
Hit Monkey, yeah, basically.
Mysterio,
But like,
if you already have Hitmonkey, you can top deck Mysterio. That helps.
Yeah, but over a large sample size, I feel like what Chavez brings to the table is like actually gives you your game plan more consistently. And like the downside of like actually drawing a sometimes not very useful 6-9 on turn 6 is very mitigated by the fact that you actually get the Kitty early, get the Bast, get the extremely important Beast to bounce the Kitty and a few other stuff. So like that is mainly why Chavez is important. I feel like people that don't think it's important because I think they don't have enough sample size on the deck. But like if I don't even know what the exact number is, but maybe 20 games, 30 games, heck, maybe even 50 games. But after X amount of games, you will see how important Chavez is for the overall consistency of your deck.
I don't even know if you're going to see it. So I think obviously I'm a Chavez truther, right? But one of the things that's really stuck out to me is that when you have Ironman in the deck, you actually just like straight up do not get punished for deploying on 5 anymore. Like you just don't get punished for doing your Hit Monkey stuff early because your turn 6 is then Kitty Pryde plus Iron Man. And like that's insane. And even if they like wave you or whatever, this is like a big reason why wave is like so bad or not as good or not even going to do anything against the bounce decks, because if you have Iron Man and Kitty Pryde as your turn 6, there's basically no downside to doing all your Hit Monkey stuff the turn before. There's no downside to it. And so for that reason, I do think that Chavez is usually like, she's gone from you do your Hit Monkey stuff and then play the Chavez. Now you're probably not even playing her then because you have like the Iron Man instead, the 3-power Iron Man. Exactly. So she's definitely a less playable version of herself. But I do think that like, yeah, okay, you get a 3% boost. No, not 3% boost. You go from 33% to 36% to see Kitty Pryde in your opening hand. You go from 33% to 36% to see Bast in your opening hand. You go, I want to say you go up about 5% to see Beast over the course of the game because, drawing Beast on 6 is absolutely useless. So you get a 5% boost in seeing Beast when you can play the card Beast. And because you are no longer punished for this deploy on 5 strategy, you actually just sort of get to do that now. It's not even like, oh, I needed to have this by turn 6. You just get to play it on turn 5 and it's fine. And
yeah,
I just sort of generally think that, I mean, what is it? The first thing you said, Lamby? 11 cards OP.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, 11 cards OP.
That's one of the things that I think people will progressively learn as they play more card games is that it's always better to play a thinner deck. And that's a fundamental, right? But as you play more and more, you start to realize how powerful it is to even go from something like 12 cards to 11 cards. It's absolutely ridiculous. I'll tell you one thing that Chavez does, which kind of lulls people into the trap of maybe cutting Chavez, is it feels really, really good sometimes to get to turn 6 and draw that Hit Monkey, or draw that Shang-Chi, draw that tech piece, rather than draw this card that, the card is kind of shit. Like, rather just draw your Chavez every single time. You feel like you're drawing it out, but it's a total trap, and it's actually just an illusion, right? You can draw the Shang-Chi earlier, you draw the Kitties earlier, you draw the Bast earlier, and if you're looking at a deck like Bounce, you win the game by having the early opening hand of play Bast, get the Angela to 3, the Kitties on 3, deploying the Kitties over to 5. Like, that's your game plan. And those hands as well give you infinitely more snap equity than maybe finding the Kitty on turn 3 or turn 4 or something like that. And that's why the deck is so powerful. And like KM said, another big fallacy about Bounce, and I'm sure you guys have heard it a million times in your stream chats, is, what about Wave? Wave is it's an absolute joke. I mean, maybe on ladder, right? So pre-Conquest, Conquest mode, came out recently, but before that we had tournaments. Maybe on ladder. Sometimes you get caught with your pants down. But arguably on ladder, you just deploy on 5 anyway, just to hedge against wave, because you don't get punished, like KM said. But wave is not the problem. If you look at the counter decks that showed up to the CCUK tournament, they're a great showcase of what actually beats bounce. And it's lane control. It's lane lockdown. It's locking the bounce. It's stopping the bounce deck from actually being able to play its cards. It's things like turn 4, turn 3 wave into turn 4 Sam. It's things like Storm, things like Spider-Man. That's what actually beats bounce. It's not wave.
Yeah.
It's also, I wanted to shout out Freddie Babes here, who did something that I think was pretty cool with his Evo deck, which was just play Wave and Odin. Because like that's the kind of thing where it's like, you're going to get someone with that. That's really cute. Like the turn 4 wave into a bounce player, already really good. Wave Odin is like that. That's so unexpected and odd that you're going to get someone with it. I like that.
Yeah, I wanna like actually I had something else to say, but I forgot. But I think this point is more important, which is like because you mentioned Freddy. I had this list that I made of like potential queues into specific people, like why am I gonna play into X player whatsoever? So there's like 17, 18 people, right? There was like only 2 people that I wanted to queue not bounce into. One of them was Freddy, because you mentioned the whole wave Odin thing. So like I left the option to maybe queue high evo lockdown versus Freddy, because like I was a bit afraid of the whole wave Odin thing in his high evo deck.
Yep. Same thing for me. So I also brought lists under the exact same philosophy as Lamby, where I brought a bounce list and I brought a proxy deck to force better matchups into bounce. And there was 4 matchups in which I would actually play my other list. One was Lamby, because Lamby had a effectively suicide matchup. If I queue bounce and Lamby queues counter bounce, I immediately lose. And the other one was actually D-Money, because D-Money was playing Pink Print, and not a lot of people were. So Pink Print is, I guess, the name that we've given that deck. It's
just the bounce deck before it got fancy.
Yeah.
Actually,
so
what is Pink Print?
Why is it called Pink
It's a Nicki
it's because of
Minaj
KM's
album.
Twitter.
It's literally it's a Nicki Minaj album. That's what it's named after. It's a Nicki Minaj album referencing Jay-Z's The Blueprint. Why is it named after that? I don't know. I wanted a cool name for it. I literally just picked one, and Brendan has been calling this Pink Print for like a month.
Yep. Well, anyway, the more greedy version of bounce that plays things like Hood, like Falcon, like Medusa, it's just better in the mirror. And I think that if you queue a deck like Lamby's, or even worse, like mine that had the Shang, has the extra tech, it's basically suicide into that matchup. And into that matchup, I was queuing my Sera deck, and if in Lamby's example, would be queuing High Evo Lockdown. And D-Money sees that you would see in my list that I have the Sera, and he can't queue bounce. So we're almost destined to queue Patriot into Sera in that case. But yeah, I was sort of under the same philosophy as Lamby, and I would only play my proxy deck against Lamby specifically because of that, and then also against the Mirror, which a deck that was much better in the Mirror.
So
Lamby,
hold on, I want to jump down
there.
Like Lamby, you see Brendan's strategy. One thing he mentioned to me was that when you played into him, he queued Sera into you, and you played bounce. And he like 10-0'd you because the matchup's like unwinnable.
Yep.
And then you just like you talked after the game. He was like, "Why'd you do that?" And you were just like, "I didn't know it was a bad matchup." And I think to me that actually speaks not to you but to them, right? They brought a deck to scare people off, but it's not actually scary. You don't actually see it as scary. And I feel like that shows like the efficacy of your strategy, which was you not only have the lockdown stuff, you have a wave in there. Everyone knows that beats bounce. Everyone knows it. So I just wanted to highlight that because like Brendan's talking about like a proxy deck. And frankly, no offense, I just feel like your version of the proxy deck was more effective at doing that because it was more obvious.
Wait, my version or Brendan's?
Yeah, your version. Brendan's version, like you just like it's like a Sera deck. You're like, okay, that's not that bad, right? But it is that bad.
Yeah.
But so effectively, what happened when I was like, I played Brendan round 3. I was looking at the list and I was like, I think the reason why I sort of like, I'll be completely frank here, I did underestimate that list, which is the reason why I was like still gonna queue bounce into it. Because like, firstly, I was very confident queuing bounce into most things. Like I was gonna even queue bounce into ramp because I knew how to play the matchup. I'm not saying that I was gonna be favored, but I knew how to play the matchup. I was confident in that matchup. But like Brandon's deck looks so, let's use a funny word for it. It looks so fair. It looks so fair.
Yes, it looks terrible. Like, it looks like shit.
Yeah, okay, I didn't want to say terrible, but it looks so fair. Then I was like, this is so fair. How am I going to lose?
Yeah,
Turns
like
out it
a
was
Sera. It's a Sera.
fairly
You're so favored.
It was fairly difficult for me to win.
Like I say this on my stream chat a lot, which is like Brandon didn't like 8-0, like 8-cube me or whatever. It was just like I lost 2 cubes, and then I just gradually died because like he wasn't really doing anything crazy. It was just that I had to retreat every single time I didn't have the perfect hand because he had the perfect outs to like almost every scenario. It's just a gradual like chipping away of my life. It wasn't even like a blowout. It was just like I just slowly died. That's basically what happened.
I mean, that's what 90-10s look like, right? He's not supposed to get aggressive. He's just going to win every game. If he gets aggressive,
I didn't realize it was that polarized with the fact that like he had. Okay, maybe because I really very disrespected Shadow King in general. I never even played the card in my life before. I haven't even put the card in a single one of my decks. So like I don't even know that it was that bad. So that was on me.
One thing I wanted to pitch, and I talked about this with Wobolos W, however you want to call him. Brendan, what if we took your deck and just literally played Invisible Woman Shang-Chi in it? We were just like, we're an Invisible Woman Shang-Chi Killmonger deck now. We put like Silver Surfer under Invisible Woman, and we like actually now we don't actually get like completely shit on by Lockjaw. We can like actually beat them, maybe, kind of.
So my current version does have Invisible Woman, just because just the way the priority works, and it's a 2/3 now. But the Shang-Chi possibly. I just don't have enough sample size on that deck in order to be like, okay, the High Evo Lockjaw or whatever matchup is bad enough to actually need the Shang-Chi. The thing is that Shadow King actually has niche usage against High Evo Lockjaw. It's actually pretty decent, right? Shadow King is pretty consistently a 3/5, and in best case scenario is like a 3/7 or 3/9. One thing I want to say though is that we talk about Lamby having the better proxy deck. I call it a proxy deck, but it's not 100% true, right? Like, if someone queued bounce into my counter bounce list because they didn't see that is like the golden scenario. The idea was that would never happen, but I was hedging it up because the deck is, people have pinged me about the deck and they're like, would you change this? Would you change that? What do you think? And I'm like, dude, everybody, that deck is shit. It's so bad. Like, you can't queue that deck on ladder. You can't queue that deck in Conquest. It is literally just in the scenario in which in the format we were playing. The only time that I was playing that deck was when I knew there was a favorable matchup, or I had literally no choice other to play my deck. And it's just built for that. It's built to beat an extremely narrow meta, and that meta is like, I've curated the matchup against my opponent who has also brought 2 decks, but it's not actually very playable on ladder. Yeah. Which is, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, against bounce, I do think it is pretty close to legitimately unwinnable. I mean, the entire deck is built to just hate bounce out. I mean, it's a Sera deck that has wave. That's not good in Sera, by the way. You don't play wave in a Sera. It's not great.
What are you talking about? You get a turn 4 Sera.
Yeah, turn 4 Sera. Yeah. Not too good. Well, I want to ask you something, Lamby, because I touched on it, but I didn't really get your thoughts. When it comes to bounce, do you think that the version of bounce that plays Falcon and plays things like the Hood, do you think that is the better version in the mirror? Because I've said it is a lot, but I haven't really got anybody else's thoughts if they actually agree that that's the better version in the mirror.
Yeah, so the thing is, I was gonna touch on this eventually if like it was not brought up again, but like I don't actually think so because of a few reasons. Firstly, D-Money's list specifically doesn't run Chavez, which I think is already a mistake because he doesn't get to draw the early stuff as consistently as me. So what I talk about when it comes to that let's call it your deck, the pink print deck. Okay, let's call it the pink print deck. But
it's gonna stick. I want to be no. First things, D-Money's list, not pink print. I don't run Ant-Man. Okay. I don't run Medusa. That's not me.
Okay, fine.
That's not me. Fine. That is not me. Fine. The reason I think that the normal bounce list is favored in the mirror is because of the collector. And because like you have that additional guy who is growing. You get more Spider-Hams. Like, they're never going to be able to actually play Iron Man. Iron Man is not a real card. It is getting Spider-Ham, right? Like, that is a 5/0 or a 5/3. If you could guarantee that you were going to be able to actually play Iron Man, I actually would be like, oh yeah, no, the Iron Man list is favored in the mirror, but like you actually can't. So the thing that matters to me is deploying early. Of course, you're going to want to run Chavez. Chavez is like a secret mirror breaker because she makes you more likely to draw Kitty. She makes you more likely to draw Bass. And those are the 2 best things you can draw in the mirror. But like, yeah, I think not necessarily D-Money's list, but like if you were to run like say minus Ant-Man, minus Medusa, you get the Chavez back in there. You play like a much more normal version of that. I do think that one is favored in the mirror. Yeah.
I think let's look at it another way as well, because like you mentioned, one more card that grows collector and then Falcon, which makes the collector big. Like I agree that those could scale really tall, but look at it another way. I feel like that is just more cards that need you to have a perfect world scenario, because like the thing is with those cards that he runs, firstly you need them like you need them like at a specific time, and Falcon also does not cheat energy. So the thing is, like Falcon, Collector, they do win the mirror. It's a lot of stats, but it's a perfect world deck. I feel like in situations whereby you don't get the perfect hand, sometimes locations are a bit worse off and stuff like that. I feel like those cards are the cards that bite you back when things don't go perfectly. So that's why I call I call that Falcon Collector deck the perfect world deck, in which if we both draw the good hands, I probably will lose with my version. But if like we both don't draw the good hands, mine has like a likely better chance to survive, you know, because like that collector deck kind of has to draw better than like has to draw well. If not, like there's a lot of like moving pieces there. Like let's say you draw collector late, right? That's one more card that like is kind of useless. Yeah, so I think there's an argument to be made when regards to like which is better, because I feel like that collector Falcon deck needs to be like you need to draw those cards in more of a perfect order than the version that I played.
Which is why you should run Chavez in it. Ah!
Yes, you still have to run Chavez regardless.
Yes.
D-Money's
But it's like
list,
even with that one, it's more pronounced, right? Like you really need Falcon. You draw Falcon on turn 6, you're just like, what am I doing? It's awful.
guys. I 5-0'd with a bounce list without Chavez in it, so it's just that's the truth. It's gospel now. You don't know.
Yeah, 5 game sample size is huge, Brandon. It's so big. Oh my god.
What? So
I'm gonna let you talk to my co-host like that. He 5-0'd, I'll have you know.
I don't know if you've heard. I've actually 5-0'd an Infinity Gauntlet. D-Money's list didn't play Spider-Ham, which I actually feel like is pretty good in the mirror, and is especially good in the mirror versus your deck, which plays Ironman, by the way, because the Spider-Ham frequently turns Ironman into a 5-0, which is absolutely unplayable.
Often, yes.
Yes, and even in the mirror, like let's say you're playing against a list that doesn't have Ironman, is the list with Falcon and Collector. A lot of times when you Spider-Ham, you're actually hitting Beast, which is kind of a mirror breaker.
It's huge.
In and of itself.
It's really huge.
It's massive. I want to ask you guys, just to kind of rewind a bit, but we never really addressed the fundamental question, which is why is Bounce the best deck?
Numbers.
Well, yeah, firstly, KM is right. Only stats. Like Marvel Snap is a very simple game. It's more solved than you guys think, which is like big numbers win. Like you can do all these like cute things like negate stuff, counter stuff, like lock stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all stats.
Numbers.
It's all stats. Like it's really like, yeah, you can lock the lanes, but you still need stats to win. You can counter stuff, but you need your own stats to win. Like Marvel Snap at its core, it's big numbers win kind of game, right? That's the core, right? More numbers wins a lane. So I feel like the thing about Bounce is that like, yes, you need a few moving parts to make your big numbers, but like the thing is with Chavez, with the fact that you have a very strong early game, like you very often get those big numbers by turn 6, and it's a 12 card deck, like 12 card deck 6-turn game. You will see almost all of your entire deck to fit all those like pieces together to make the big numbers. So I think one of the big points to note is that like those numbers that you make with Bounce generally scale taller than the other good deck, which is like Lockjaw Evo. You are slightly bigger than them. I won't say you are always bigger, but you are more often than not bigger than them, which is good enough for it to take the top spot in the meta, right? Let's put it this way. Like, remember that time when Shuri was king? Shuri decks just had the biggest numbers, and like, it's very simple, right? There's a certain level of inevitability to it. Like, if they have Shuri, they have Red Skull, they have Taskmaster. Even if you know they have it, what can you do sometimes? You just know they have it. There's a certain level of inevitability. So I think Bounce has that sometimes. And plus, the thing about Bounce is that you can allocate these points very creatively. Mm-hmm. It's not like just big numbers, gotta go here, gotta go there. They can go anywhere. Like, I think if you watch some of my matches, like, I played my stats in a lot of different places, and they were big in the places I want them to be big. And like, it's not definite. My opponent had to keep guessing. So that's why Bounce is strong.
Yeah, so I want to jump off of that, talk about Shuri, right? Because the whole thing I was doing against Shuri, this is like the whole premise, is you flip the Red Skull lane. That's how you were supposed to play against Shuri, because their whole strategy is predicated on this Red Skull is going to win this lane. And one of the things that the flexibility of bounce does is you don't get that free shot
Yes.
flipping it.
I wanted to say you don't know which lane to flip with bounce, like,
Yes.
until it's too late a lot of the time. And even if you guess it, well, then I will retreat.
Yeah, like the points that it puts out are too high and too flexible, right? So back in the beta, there were old school Sera decks, and this is like before a ton of shit got nerfed. So I'm gonna run through like some cards that we used to play, right? We used to play 2-cost Lady Sith, 3-cost Ghost Rider on America Chavez. So like that was just like it was just like a 1-cost Lady Sith and a 2-cost Ghost Rider. That was our Sera play, right? Mysterio was just a literal 2/5. We had a strong guy that was a 2/3 that got +6. Anyway, that is the kind of deck that Sera used to be. Like, this is before Sera had to be a tech control deck. It was just like, we're going to put out 50 points of power on the final turn of the game, and you do not get to know where that is. You have to figure out where that's going, not me. And that is what Bounce reminds me of now, where it's just like between Hitmonkey and Kitty Pryde, it has been boosted to this level where it's just like, you have to figure out how to beat the most points in the game without knowing where all those points are going. And that is damn
Scary.
near unbeatable. It is really hard to deal with. And so I think a lot of people talk about like, oh, High Evo's so broken. And it's just like, look, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, the reason Bounce is good, though, we talked about like flipping that lane in against Red Skull. It's because it flips that lane against Lockjaw. Lockjaw is a deck much like the Red Skull deck, the Sherry Red Skull deck. It's like, we're going to win this lane. And if you lose that lane, you're just dead. And Bounce flips that lane really well.
Yeah. How do you do the math as the opponent against Bounce to like the challenge to accurately predict what the exact point slam of Bounces can get genuinely pretty tough, especially when you start considering, you know, the variability of having the Mysterio with the Hitmonkey. If you've bounced that back a few times, or you've beasted the Hitmonkey back, so it's maybe at like a 1/5 or something. So, you know, all these other cards were basted at turn 1. Like, it is literally possible, but in the short amount of time that you have to like actually know the exact quantitative output potential of Bounce with a reasonable level of variability that you are plus or minus, like, it's too much. Like, it's just a lot. You kind of have to go a bit off feel and, you know, play against where you think they're most likely to play the stats, where it makes the most sense. But the exact numbers, it's night and day. Like playing against Shuri, it's like, you literally know. Like, you know exactly how much it is. You like that Taskmaster, you know, pre-nerf, that's a 28 power Taskmaster, and there's maybe a, you know, 1/3/0, 1/5 Titanium that comes down on top of it or in a separate lane. But in Bounce, it's nothing like that. So yeah, fundamentally, Bounces, it's the best point slam deck in the game, by quite a margin. The fact that it can play tech cards and still be the best point slam deck in the game is, I think, what makes it absolutely ridiculous. I want to ask you guys about one card that has, you know, it's not traditionally associated with Bounce, but it makes it into a lot of lists, and I think it's something that's really brought the deck up quite a bit, and that's Ironman. What are your thoughts on Ironman in Bounce specifically?
I'm going to cede the floor here. I was wrong about Iron Man. Lamby was right about Iron Man.
Yeah, I remember KM wasn't really convinced about it at first, but I'm glad he is right now. It's the same way for me when I wasn't even convinced that Bounce was good, and then like he was trying to tell me that it was good for like weeks, and I wasn't convinced. But
I was trying to tell everyone that it was good. No one believed me. I was like,
yeah, I'm one of those people guilty of saying that it loses to wave, but that's because I didn't test Bounce enough. But after testing it for like less than 24 hours, heck, I think in the first few hours I realized like, no, this does not lose to wave at all.
It loses to wave if you're bad. Like, that's literally it. I know that sounds like an asshole thing to say, but it loses to wave if you're bad.
And also, it loses to wave if you don't know it's there. But in open lists, you always know it's there, right? Or like, But anyway, wait, sorry, what was the question again? I kind of forgot.
Iron Man.
Iron Man. Okay, so firstly, Iron Man is number 1, very good because Bast, and Bast is core in, I feel, Bounce, right? Look at Iron Man compound double stats, and like the fact that it's a 5/3 Iron Man after Bast compounds its own stats, which is a lot. Like, oftentimes, I literally play a match of Bounce hoping to Bast and Iron Man. Like, if I look at my hand, I'm like, all right, this Bast is only going to be played after I draw Iron Man, that kind of thing. Like, because it scales so crazily. Like, I feel like I would like win super hard if I get to Bast and Iron Man. And like, one more thing about Iron Man is that yes, it's 5 cost is super expensive, but like the thing is like, you have to remember that like 5+1, Ironman plus Kitty, and if you get Kitty early, over time, it's like super easy to solo. Well, duo a lane with Ironman plus Kitty. And like, you have like stuff in every other lane, right? You have like monkeys, you have Angelas, you have bishops, you have like sometimes bastard Mysterios and all that. Like, you have points everywhere already. It's kind of impossible to not have a good Ironman lane because your points are just everywhere. So I find it very difficult to not have a good Ironman lane. So I think Ironman is just a natural fit.
Yeah, I actually frequently play my Iron Man. Obviously it's variable on the hand, but I'll frequently play it into my bishop lane. To be honest, like even on turn 5 and then point 7, point 6. Yeah, assuming no wave, right? I find that to be sort of a consistent play I take. I want to talk a little bit about, for people that are picking up bounce, and actually, I just want a disclaimer here with bounce. I think bounce is one of the harder decks to play in Marvel Snap, but not a hard deck to play. Prior to the tournament, the CCUK tournament, I actually never played bounce. I never played it.
I think the Falcon version with Falcon and the Hood is really hard to play because one, there's so much hand ordering and figuring out whether your hand is full and what you're going to hit with Bast and figuring out like, okay, how do I value getting a 3-power Hood versus making my Demon 3-power? And like, that's all this like really intricate stuff that takes forever to think about. The builds that y'all ended up on are very easy to play.
Yes, you're right. The pink print version, as it's named across the world, definitely no. It's actually infinitely harder to play. At least to sort of map your turns, bounce things back correctly. It's like, do I play this Angela on 2 or do I play my Collector, etc. It's actually the much more fun version of the deck. I think if you're looking to learn bounce, depends how much of a psychopath you are, but maybe start with that list so you can work backwards from it.
Start with that. No, don't play the good one. Don't do that.
It's the fun one.
Yeah, just play the.
Let's play the good one.
Okay, so I like how KM Best straight up calls play the good one as like the list that myself played, which is quite interesting because this is very interesting. And my take on this is that I am completely not opposed to playing complex decks and learning complex decks, but I feel like there is no actual reason to overcomplicate things sometimes. Sometimes the simple things are just better, Like, I always joke with KM about, like, sometimes just play cards on curve and you just win. Like, it's true. Like,
I'm the mid-range paladin guy. Of course I love playing cards on curve.
Just play cards. Like the thing is,
you have to always factor in that, like, complicated is not always better. And I'm not saying that the bounce list that I played was, like, strictly very easy. It's easier, but for Marvel Snap deck, I think it's still like a bit higher skill cap than other decks already.
Yeah.
So what I think is that, like, because in a Conquest game, in a battle mode game, there are a lot of things to consider. A lot, like cube management, like your snapping, your locations, your like. Realistically, do I want to overcomplicate things and have to think about all these other things that I just mentioned as well? If the deck is worth it, yes. But in this current scenario, we found the easier version that is also a little bit better. And then we have more brain room to think about the snapping, the cube management, the location. So, like, pick the easier choice if it's actually better and leave yourself a bit more brain room to think about other things.
Even if it's not better,
real.
Even if they're the same. If 2 decks are exactly the same, except one is
very close,
easier to play, then you always take the one that's easier to play. Every time.
If it's quite close, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Going off my previous point, I think from experience, pretty much never playing that deck, picking it up a couple days before, pretty much based off Lamby's tweet. I'm not gonna lie. Lamby was like, "This deck is busted." So I was like, "Okay, I guess I gotta take a look."
Yeah.
It's attainable. Like, it's a very attainable deck to pick up and be successful with. It's just like when you compare it to something like a Shuri, maybe it's not.
Okay, so it's like exactly 20% harder than Evo Lockdown. Like, like their decks are easy to play, right? Like, don't get me wrong, but like this is like it's so proactive that it, like, the parts that make it hard to play are mostly just like, what is my opponent's plan against me? And that's the only thing that really like trips you up, I think.
Yeah.
I think thinking about what your opponent's plan is versus you should be applied to most Marvel Snap situations and decks. Because, like, I know this is going to be not a popular take, but like, maybe because I have a card game background, so I say this with a lot more ease, but I have not seen a Marvel Snap deck that is like impossible to learn, like Marvel Snap is not that game, Marvel Snap is really not that game. Like, I think it's a genius game because the barrier to entry for Marvel Snap is super low, but the to be able to master it is actually super hard. So in terms of like mastering decks, I haven't seen one that is like just impossible, or like even if you have no card game background, you pretty much can pick up almost any Marvel Snap deck and like be decent at it. That's what I think.
It's funny you say that because I think the biggest skill diff that I see and feel in Marvel Snap is actually in relation to snapping and when when to retreat.
Timing is important.
When you play against your first player that's significantly better at you than that, you will feel the pressure, and it literally is like drowning in deep water. It's ridiculous. Like you just it's terrifying. But I want to ask you guys, because maybe a lot of people listening to this list are interested in Bounce, or they've been playing it and they're going to pick it up. What are some of we talked about it a little bit too? What are some of the early snappable hands with Bounce? Like some of the best hands you can draw turn one. One of the things I think is really, really powerful about Bounce, I think it has a great turn one snap equity, right? There is some cards you can draw which you can snap. I will say that with the caveat that Bounce is one of those decks it's a little bit weak to location.
Yeah,
so
like,
you are snapping
actually snapping turn one
all the time. Like
really?
I have Bast,
assuming
Angela.
You don't know their deck list.
Yes, because I have advantage, right? I know that I'm playing the best deck in the game, and I've drawn the best version that hand can draw. Even if I'm not going to win that game, if I draw a bad location, we get like space thrown, and we get some other shit. It's fine. I snapped when I had advantage over my opponent because I know that there's almost 0% chance my opponent has a better hand than me because I'm playing Bounce and I drew Bast, Kitty, Angela, X.
So my thought process is, since we're so favored against so many things. In the dark, a lot of what I do is just I try to replicate what you described your Surfer deck did to Lamby. Because that's what Bounce is going to do against, like, if any deck is unprepared for Bounce, it's just going to bleed to death, regardless. You don't need to raise the variance, I feel like, when you're playing just the absolute best deck in the game. Because you're good, like, the degree to which Bounce is better than every other Point Slam deck is enormous. Like, the degree to which Bounce is better than like a Darkhawk deck that is trying to leverage wave to beat it. Like, you are putting probably double the amount of points onto the board than that deck is. Like, you are putting so much more on, right? And so for that reason, I feel like in matchups like that, I'm just like, I'm good. Like, I will bleed you to death because my deck is better than yours. And the more I introduce variance, the more it helps them.
Lamby,
I think I agree with like both of you a little bit here and there. From my personal experience playing Bounce. Okay, so I'm generally a very aggressive snapper by nature. I think from the previous episode, you guys would probably know me talking about aggressive snapping. But Bounce actually catches me a little bit different. I'm still the same aggressive snapper, but like whether I know my opponent's deck list or not really changes how I snap with Bounce a lot. Like in the previous episode where we talk about Lockjaw, the whole Mind Stone snap thing, I think that one is like quite uniform whether I know or don't know your deck list. But like, because the thing about Bounce is that it has so many moving parts compared to other Marvel Snap decks. So I need to know how my moving parts can tie in versus your deck list before I can like snap. Like, okay, let me give you a very simple example. Like, let's just use the Bounce Mirror, right? Like, I have Kitty on turn 1 in the Bounce Mirror. I might not snap you because I need to see if you have Kitty on turn 1 first, right?
Exactly. It's super important.
It's super important because, like, in that matchup, if we both have Kitty on turn 1, then I need to do the next check. Do you have the Iceman for my
Angela? Do you have the Iceman
or do
for
I
my
have
Bishop?
The Bast?
Yeah,
or
whoever has the
actually
Bast,
better,
right? That kind of thing. So in the mirror, I feel like aggressive snapping is very dangerous if you don't like check. You need to check. I feel like the mirror is one of the few times that, as much as I'm the most aggressive snapper ever, I am not as aggressive because it goes completely shit if they have exactly the thing that you cannot beat. Like, if they Bast and their Bast is Ironman, Mysterio, Monkey, you are fucked, man.
Yeah.
If you don't have the monkey, really, it's very hard to win.
That is exactly what I was trying to get at. Like,
Kitty's good.
You have to know, like, Bounce more than any other deck, you need to know what they're doing to you. And until you know what they're doing to you, because your baseline is so strong, until you know what they're doing to you, you do not want to give them 8 cubes for doing it to you.
Yeah,
I think TLDR, sorry, just want to add, so basically, to add on to that, like, final point, which is, if it's an open decklist tournament, I'm way more aggressive with Bounce.
Yes.
But if it's not, like Conquest, right? Because like there's so many things that can go wrong. Like Conquest in the game, I am like a lot more passive with bounce in Conquest. Not because of the stakes, that doesn't matter to me, but like it's more because of the fact that like a lot of things can go south with a deck that's so technical like bounce if you don't know what they can do to you, like KM said.
Yes, like that. Like this is why I was so surprised when you started talking about snapping on turn 1. I would never play like that in a Conquest. I just wouldn't do it.
So, well, yeah, I think there's so I wouldn't play like that in the Conquest round 1. But one thing I'll say is that you're not playing for 8 cubes. You're playing for 4, right? You're playing for them on the snapback, and then you retreat because you know how the game will end if you're able to sort of accurately predict what your opponent's deck can reasonably do. You're usually playing for 4 if you're snapping early, and you're losing. But also, yeah, I feel comfortable snapping turn 1, not because it's not really I'm snapping to win, I'm snapping because I'm advantaged, I think. I think it is more likely, rather than not, that I'm advantaged in the scenario where I draw those cards and I have the best, and that's why I snap. And, I won't win all those games, I will lose cubes, I will get punished for snapping like that sometimes, but I think on the delta, it happens more often than not that I've snapped the correct hand and I've snapped in a scenario where I'm advantageous. So, yeah, I think that's sort of the ideology behind it. I do want to talk about what those hands are. What are those hands for bounce? Because we've talked about it a bit through here, right? We talked about the Bast, right? The Bast is actually better than the Kitty on 1, because Kitty on 1 is it turns into a 1-2. Bast quickly turns out into a 1-3.
Well, you end up wanting to save the Bast, though, right? Like,
okay, yeah. So it depends, right? Like if I have Bast and Kitty in hand, I'm still always playing the Kitty first, because Bast, like in this deck, based on like the curve and what is actually good to Bast in the deck, the more cards you draw, the better the Bast gets. So like if I have both Bast and Kitty in my opening hand, right, I'll just be like, all right, let's just play this Kitty, get +2, play this Kitty, get +2. Like I wouldn't worry about it being like +3 to +5, that kind of thing, because like holding the Bast lets you like see more things, like I think the only time I really Bast first is very specifically if it's like Angela Bishop, that kind of crazy curve.
When you have all the targets, Mysterio, Ironman, right? Like,
oh yeah,
Mysterio's busted.
I spent a while doing Bast first because I was just like, oh, that's what you do. And then what I gradually realized is like, wait, why am I'm Basting instead of Kittying? I'm getting 1 extra point. I'm getting 1 extra point. And if I hit a Mysterio with this, that's like 5 extra points. What are we doing here?
Yes.
Like it's actually literally that simple. Like you're not Basting a Kitty, you're Basting everything else.
Yes, exactly. So what Lamby is saying is that he's willing to take the one loss in value of the Kitty, turn the Kitty into a 1-3 in order to draw another card and get an additional 3 points on it, or 2 points. If you look at most of the cards in the bounce deck, they do benefit from this card. Like the Ironman, you can count that as sort of like a +6 buff. The Mysterio, like you said, is +5, because the way Mysterio works is Mysterio, for people that don't know, because I guess Mysterio does have some funky ass interactions, by the way. Yeah. But Mysterio is puts 3 things in one thing in each lane, and they're all 0/0s, and the main one you played is 0/4. But when you Bast it, everything is a 3. It's 3 power, effectively. So
I might be an idiot. 2/9. I actually prioritize Basting Mysterio over Ironman. I don't know if that makes me stupid or not, but like it's so damn good on the.
It is.
If quantitatively though, the Ironman is better by 1 point, right?
Because it's less flexible. Like there are going to be situations where you're not playing the Ironman, but there's basically never going to be a situation where you're not playing Mysterio.
That's true. That's true, because Mysterio, in and of itself, when paired with the Hit Monkey, is an additional +6 on Hit Monkey, which is
it's a 2/9. It's like Doctor Doom. It's barely worse than Doctor Doom. It's like 4 points worse than Doctor Doom,
and it's a lot cheaper.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like so the thing is, one thing we should probably I assume the same for you, but I pretty much never play Mysterio on 2. I never play Mysterio pretty much without the Hit Monkey.
Almost never. Yeah, almost never.
So because of that, Mysterio in bounce is frequently the 2/9 like we talked about. Yes. Or you do the 4, which is, so it's a 2/4 +6 because you're always playing with Hit Monkey, so it's a 2/10 in that case, right? The 2/9 is actually before the Hit Monkey buff, it's a 2/15. 2/15 when you play it Bast. So that card is actually one of the most OP cards in bounce, which is funny because a lot of the cards in bounce are actually overpowered. But other cards that are key to have in your opening hand, we talked about the Bast. Kitty Pryde is obvious, but things like Angela, things like Bishop, like those are key to sort of pushing that singular lane so that you can now play the Hit Monkey in an additional off lane. Like the Angela is just absolutely ridiculous in this deck because of its interaction with Kitty Pryde. Specifically, if you're able to get that card, Kitty Pryde buffing the Angela, then going back to hand, it just allows you to grow that Angela to such a size. Do you guys frequently find yourself playing Bishop on 3? And if it's contextual, what is it contextual on?
I was going to ask the same question because it's one of these scenarios where I personally, I think a lot of it, like, you know, obviously if they storm, yeah, I'm gonna if they have a storm, I'm gonna save the bishop until 4 so I can put it in the storm lane, right? I can know where that's gonna be. But yeah, I think a lot of the time, like the old bounce style is, you know, Angela plus Kitty on 2, or Angela plus Kitty on 3, Bishop plus Kitty on 4, and like that's the style of bounce that actually loses to wave because then you're beasting on 5 and dying, right? So I think again, like everything else, it's contingent on what your opponent is doing to try to beat you. And if you're able to give up 2 power on a Kitty to get a bishop in early and benefit from that, then yeah, you're fine with that.
Yeah, to add to that, I feel like because generally I'm quite adaptive when it comes to my playstyle. I give up the Kitty stats very often because I always talk about this. I have this thing. I do this thing called future sight, whereby, especially with bounce, you really have to have future sight because like the deck is like, I'm not even kidding when I say that you can plan the game from turn 1 and know how you win from turn 1 or how you lose. You really can. You really can because like if I know that this deck, like my opponent runs wave and like it eventually would likely be played on turn 5, I will undervalue Kitty a lot. Like I will just undervalue her and just play stuff that doesn't go back to my hand because like at the end of the day, if they wave on 5 and you play a lot of stuff on 5, they actually lose tempo. So you don't really care that you're losing stats on the Kitty if your stuff just sticks in their going into their wave turn. So yeah, I do undervalue Kitty a lot if I know what I'm up against. But like for example, things like the mirror, whereby both people have Kitty on 1, you might want to max value. Obviously that's also case by case, right? Like you don't have to max value if you have Bast and they don't have Bast because right, they're also losing stats because your Mysterio is a 2-9, their Mysterio is not a 2-9, you know, stuff like that. So it's super technical, but I feel like at the end of the day, the TLDR is that like there's no hard and fast rule as to how big you need your Kitty to be. It's really dependent on the matchup and like the exact hand.
I think more people make the mistake, and I'm including myself in this because I've watched my own gameplay back and I've been like, oh man, okay. I think more people than not make the mistake of overvaluing the Kitty. I think if you're listening to this, you are probably overvaluing the Kitty because it feels good to do that. It feels good. Oh, the number, we're doing the thing. This is the thing the deck does. But like, one of the things about becoming a good player is you have to take yourself out of just letting the deck play itself, and you have to play the deck. And that Kitty is one of the situations where the deck plays itself for you, and that feels really good because you don't have to think about shit. But you actually do, unfortunately, have to think about shit.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, it's so with the if you think about it with the bishop, if you take off the kitty bonus on 3 in order to play the bishop, you'll likely be getting more points out of that bishop over the course of a bounce game if you're doing something like a hit monkey or point slam.
Wait, that's not always true. That's not always true. Like
you're right. It's not always true.
But like it's one of those things. Like people think of the game outside of the context, right? And that's impossible. Because the game is the context. Everything is context, right? Like you can't. It's why heuristics bother me so much. Because you know the heuristic in this situation is you maximize your Kitty power, but that's how you play the deck in a vacuum. That's not how you play the deck if you think they're going to wave you, right? Like that's the basic thing here, right? Like it's like everything else with bounce. It's about what they're doing to you. And bounce, I mean, that's how most games of Marvel Snap are, right? Like that's how being good at card games is. You think about what they're going to do to you, but bounce more vulnerable than anything to blowouts because you're just automatically going to win if they're doing nothing to you.
Yeah. You can't afford to auto lose a storm lane as bounce. You're left with 2 lanes to deploy on, which is not enough. And then if they Spider-Man the other lane, you auto lose. Like I mean, it's just you can't afford it.
It's like okay, so there's that location that you can't play cards after turn 4. What's it called? Is it called Kiln? Yeah, Kiln. Okay, so Kiln, the one that makes you everything costs more expensive on turn 5. That location, I am so shit with names. Yeah, but like all these locations, the moment you see it, right, your brain needs to switch, and then you need to like maybe potentially start undervaluing Kitty and start playing more like stat permanence without actually like making Kitty bigger.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
for
Marvel
sure.
Snap is a game defined by context, enforced by not just your opponent's deck, but the locations, right? And
Yeah.
it's why there's just no easy answer to this. Like the answer is going to be like this sounds so stupid, but you do the thing that is smart in the situation. Like that's what.
No,
you
it's not
do.
stupid. It's absolutely correct. It's absolutely correct.
Yeah,
It sounds
I agree
stupid
with you
because
guys.
it's like a tautology, right? What's the smart play? Doing the thing that's smart. Like, yeah, of course it is. But
Yeah.
like, the key is the second part of it, which is the situation. You have to be
Context.
adaptive.
I think in order to make the correct decision more often than not in the situations, it does drastically help to understand the math of a lot of this stuff, at least to its fundamentals. Because when we talk about when we talk about Mysterio being a 215, I guarantee you there's people out there that play this deck, that play the Mysterio on the Hitmonkey, have never thought about the card like that, never thought about its actual value in those scenarios, after it's been bashed and things like that. And I think you're 100% right. It's very dependent on this scenario. Everything is extremely contextual Marvel Snap, and Marvel Snap is a very high variance game, especially with the locations. But it's important to understand the trade-off of the like literal quantitative values, because they help guide you in the direction of making the right decision. They give you those little shortcuts. So when you see a scenario where something is stormed, or you see a scenario where there's a kiln and you have to commit points, you have that little, this little note in the back of your mind where, of how to potentially sequence that correctly. I want to ask you guys about two cards in the bounce list that are sometimes in the same list, but not always. One of them is a new card, which is Spider-Ham. And then I want to ask you about Iceman. What are the use cases of these cards, and are either of these actual staples in the list that you think that are just permanent?
Well, for me, it's very simple. Okay, so I want to bring a third card into this, which is Shang-Chi. So I think the general idea is when it comes to tech cards in a very like multiple pieces kind of deck, like bounce, right? You need to look at it as a whole thing, whereby the tech cards are supposed to be in the deck, or like can fit in the deck if it doesn't hurt and even benefits your overall game plan. So why I bring Shang-Chi into this is because Spider-Man and Iceman, without even talking about their effects yet, they cost 1. So when it costs 1, it means with Beast it costs 0, right? And 0 is infinitely better than 1 Marvel Snap because you can fit it all into 1 turn. So when things cost 0 with Beast, it means that it benefits Monkey, benefits Bishop, benefits Angela. Shang-Chi can never cost 0 in the deck. So in terms of tech cards that are most relevant to your overall strategy and doesn't compromise you for the most part, Iceman and Ham severely outclass Shang-Chi because it doesn't brick you. And to go even deeper into that, Iceman versus Ham, I feel like in the current state of the meta, I look at things like Lockjaw and I look at things like the Bounce Mirror. I still think Iceman is the superior card to Ham because it screws the curve. And for Lockjaw screwing the curve, it just means they could pass turn 3 and that's GG. And they just die. And like for what's that called? Bounce mirrors or just bounce. Yes, you can ham the Iron Man, it's huge. But before you even need to think about Iron Man, if you can Iceman a Kitty, Iceman a Beast, Iceman a Angela, Iceman a Bishop, right? They don't even get to turn 5 without like worry. So Iceman is very likely still the superior card based on the meta.
It's another reason to not play Bast on turn 1, by the way, because if you play Bast on turn 1 and you have Kitty in hand against Iceman, the game is over, basically. It's you're in a really bad spot, because
you do actually just die in the mirror if you have a 2-cost Kitty. But they never get to actually know that. So there is that.
True. True.
They'll figure it out eventually, but they don't get to know it.
You don't have
just think you don't have Kitty, but yeah.
Yeah, wait until they change Iceman. It's going to become an infinitely more popular card, even though it does the same thing.
Spider-Ham is so weird to me. I have no read on the card. This card has been out for a while. I've played with it a bunch. It's got my preferred border, all that stuff. I've played a lot of Spider-Ham. I can't tell how it's like. Sometimes I wonder if I just cut it, would I even notice? And the reason I don't is because I think specifically in the Evo lockdown matchup, it has just an insane amount of utility. And I would play any number of cards to make that matchup not terrible because it is so bad if you're not preparing for it. But like Spider-Ham early hitting a Spider-Man or something, and then Spider-Man late hitting Spider-Ham late hitting a Doctor Doom is just like, it's the most disgusting thing you can do in that matchup. And I do want to bring a fourth card in here, though. I want to pitch you on a card. We've had this conversation before. He's going to be mad. What about Electra? It's
Oh, man.
actually good in the mirror. I swear to God, it is good in the mirror.
I tried it, but man, I hate that card so much, man. Like, I just feel it's so difficult. It's like, okay, it's easier. Okay, so you're not wrong in the sense that I actually would consider the card because it costs 1, correct? Like, it fits the theory of like what I'm talking about. But it's not one of those tech cards that you can play as freely
That's
As Iceman and Ham, you know.
Yeah,
man.
And I
Iceman
think
and
that
Ham are
restricts it
good.
a little bit.
Yeah, Iceman and Ham are doing something every time, right? Whether or not that thing is like particularly good, that's up to whatever they hit. But Electra is not doing something, and that's yeah. But it is sincerely one of the only deck building things I can think of that can make you win a mirror. Because like figuring out ways to win a mirror in decks is something I focus on pretty heavily. If I think I'm playing the best deck, I want to play the one that beats the mirror, right? And that is like Electra is like one of literally one way. I cannot think of another way that actually gives me a significant mirror advantage without giving up just a ton of shit.
fair point.
The thing about Electra, and I tested it actually quite a bit in lead up to the tournament, and
Same, I did
ultimately
as
played.
well.
Yeah, so the reason why I don't like Electra is one, you have to manipulate priority correctly, and then if you also manipulate priority correctly, you still have to guess the right lane because the way Kid interacts, it's bouncing back to him every time. So not only do you have to be in a preferable priority scenario, and if your opponent knows you're on Electra, then they're trying to manipulate it as well. But you also have to guess the kitty lane. So your opponent now knows you have Electra and something like a Conquest. They're playing the kitty lane, maybe not in the Angela lane. They're playing it into an off lane. All this kind of stuff. I feel like the card is just very easy-ish. Not super easy, but you can play around it. And then let's talk about the floor of Electra then. What's the floor? Well, the floor is a 1-2. It's gonna hit the Bast. It's gonna hit the Ham. It's gonna hit the Iceman. Oh wow, it's a 1-3 now. And it frees up a spot. It frees up a spot for your opponent's bounce deck. That's why I don't. In the heads up matchup, bounce v bounce, I take Ham over Electra if I had to pick every day of the week because if you play a bounce mirror, just have one player not play the Ham. Have the other one play the Ham. You'll realize quickly how fucking annoying that card is. You're like, your opponent plays Ham. Wow, it hit my Beast. I lose. Your opponent plays Ham. Wow, it hit my Iron Man. This card is literally dead. Like it's just so frustrating to play against.
That's interesting. Okay, you have convinced me. You have convinced me.
Oh, there's one more thing.
Electra's only worthwhile if she's actually winning you the mirror, and if she's not winning you the mirror, then she's not worth playing.
Yeah, there's one more thing that I want to add, which actually Braden touched on, but like in my testing, this came up so often, which is okay, because this only happens, I think you guys know this, but like maybe didn't realize it as often, but like the thing is, if you're trying to snipe the kitty, right, the kitty is always going to be played in the lane with other 1-cost cards because they want to bounce everything with Beast anyway. So if it's very often going to be played in the lane with other 1-cost cards, you are very often doing like 50-50 or like 33% snipes, which that's not very fun, right, for a card that's so niche.
Damn.
So,
one day we'll figure out how to actually beat the mirror. One of the things that made me like really off bounce when it was like the big deck when Kitty first like came back was just like, oh, I have no idea. I do not feel like, especially on ladder, it's just like, oh, these mirrors are draw RNG. They played Kitty and I didn't play Kitty. I'm dead. Like I am.
Somebody asked me. Because I guess I'm kind of known as a Shadow King truther at this point. But somebody's like, can we play Shadow King and bounce? And I was like, I tried it.
Didn't I ask you that?
No, it was Brown. Brown asked it the other day. I actually tried it as well. It was always Brown.
I don't think you can because the curve is too clunky and the symmetrical effect of Shadow King hits more cards than you think it does. So let me run you through this. It hits Kitty. It hits Angela. It hits Bishop. Guess what else it hits? It hits Mysterio. Like, this thing hits everything, and it's symmetrical. Your opponent is, if they sense you have Shadow King, or just what's funny is that the bounce deck actually just naturally splits the Bishop and Angela usually, so you're not getting 2 for 1 with that. And then you also have to have preferential priority, which means you have to not have priority in order to snipe both the Angela and the Kitty, which is your dream El Dorado scenario. So that also is unlikely to happen. And because of all those reasons, I don't think you can play Shadow King in the mirror, but I do think that Shadow King absolutely destroys bounce if you can play a deck that can fit it in.
Can we talk about priority for a second?
Go for it.
Because like we've had priority decks in Marvel Snap before, right? Like, be ahead deck, leech leader kind of thing. But oh my god, is Bounce a priority deck? It's just a priority deck the other way. Like, I'm out here playing Invisible Woman, Killmonger, Shang-Chi stuff because I am so sick of not being able to play these cards against Bounce.
Yep. Do you want to know why Bounce is OP? Because of the way Kitty interacts with priority. Because Kitty goes back to hand and puts 0 points on the board, and basically in almost every scenario where you're playing against another functional deck that's not also playing Kitty, they will have priority. And it's just so easy to accumulate persistent or increasing advantage by buffing your Kitty while also not having priority and not being subject to Killmonger, to Elektra, to like all of these cards that are designed to actually beat that. And that's why I honestly think that is the single reason right now, or the main reason, that Bounce is just a total bullshit deck. It can play around tech cards easily.
Yeah. On that note, I want to say that it's super easy to beat Shang-Chi. Like, because the thing is, you see, right, like if they want to Shang your Angela, they want to Shang your Bishop, right? That's a final turn 4 energy commitment. If they have to final turn 4 energy commitment to kill your Angela or Bishop, why not I just leave my Bishop or Angela at 7 or 8, and 4 energy, you're gonna spend 4 energy to try and kill it, but like if I'm leaving it at 7 or 8, like it's big enough, right? It's big enough. You can
I got absolutely rolled by a Bounce player doing that. They just let everything was 7, including their bastard hit monkey. It's just like it's all perfect. It's like it's all 7. Just like, oh my.
Yeah, because if it's all a bunch of little guys that have overstated stats, like even if it's 5, 6, or 7, it's all cheap. You play a lot of it, it's gonna compound to like way more than like one singular 9, 10, 11 power card.
The Shang-Chi.
I just want to hold on. I gotta stop. I gotta revisit that for a second. Think about how fucked up that is. It's like, yeah, if you just like if you intentionally limit your power, you're still winning all these games. Like if you,
I've actually done it a lot as well.
Especially if you know they have Shang and you know that they are like, it's kind of obvious when they're setting up to Shang you, right? They have like one thing in that lane, and then you know that if they go Shang there, they win the lane. You kind of know it's coming, so you can like just not let them do it.
That's one of those situations where you really need to be thinking about that the whole game, right? Because if you accidentally get too overzealous and that Angela hits 7 or 9 too early, well then you're kind of
exactly.
In the mirror, Shang-Chi starts out as a pig. I'll say that.
That is the worst card. That is the worst card in the mirror by a mile.
It is a 4/3. It's a 4/3 pig from the start. It's a 4/3 pig because it literally does nothing if your opponent knows how to play around it, which they should.
It's not even if they do. Do they know anything to play around? Like, you're never actually just going to play it unless they literally put an Angela at a 9 before turn 5. Like, unless they put an Angela at a 9, you're never playing the card.
Or you guess
they can put it to 9, but like at the same time, if you're spending 4 energy to kill the Angela, they're just spending all their energy doing more things.
Did you guys know that Angela and Bishop used to have 1 more power? That was another.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. Angela and Bishop used to have 1 more power. The old beta Marvel Snap was so cool. It was just like 27 of the world's worst cards.
There's a few cards. There's a few cards actually. Mysterio used to be a natty 2/5. Like I mean, there's
This wasn't even in beta. This was like in open access as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mysterio 2/5 was in open access. I'm quite sure Mysterio was changed.
I'm positive that it was. It was changed in open access. It was a 2/5.
I remember.
So what's funny is that we have multiple pages of notes left to talk about, but we ended up just talking about Bounce the entire time.
Yeah,
the entire time. I want to ask you guys though: do you think that Bounce is a overpowered deck that needs? Do you think it needs a nerf or does it need a change? And is it constricting the meta in a negative way?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
I thought about it a bit and like, this is like the Sera deck that does more than the Sera deck
ever did. Because
the issue here's the thing with Bounce. I feel like this is not a point I'm very good at conveying, so bear with me. But it completely invalidates every deck that is not built to beat it. Completely.
Yes.
And what that means, though, is like there are all these other kinds of decks that want to put points on the board because that's like a basic thing in Marvel Snap. You win games by putting points on the board. And every single one of them just 100-0'd by Bounce. Like, just absolutely 100-0'd. Shuri, like, that's a cool deck. It'd be cool if we could actually play it. That would be super nice, but you can't because you lose to bounce. Black Bolt Stature. That'd be super cool. Maybe I would love to play Black Bolt Stature. Oh, wait, we put out like 20 points of power and they put out 40? Okay, I guess we're fucking dead. Like that, there are so many decks that you could be playing otherwise that you absolutely cannot be playing without like 3 dedicated slots to deal with this crap.
I don't think it's 3. I think it's like 5 or 6 because I'll reference the Brendan deck. Like the only reason why Brendan's deck is insane is because it destroys bounce, but it's a pocket meta, right? Like that surfer deck is good in that one tournament, and if you want to play that deck on ladder, and you literally need to pray you fight bounce 9 out of 10 times. If not, it's like pointless, right?
I actually have a bit of hope for that deck because, like I said, I've really been enjoying this Invisible Woman. I've been on this Invisible Woman Killmonger Shang-Chi kick for a little bit, where it's just like I feel like it opens up deck building just a little bit in terms of like having a way to combat bounce that is not wave. Because wave constricts your deck building so heavily and also doesn't fucking work, right? So you need a way to combat bounce that isn't wave. So I've been on that kick, and I really wonder if we could get... Because if we already have like a super positive bounce matchup, can we get a Shang-Chi in there and get us to positive against Lockjaw? And like that's, I think, my major question. Is like, if we can do that, then suddenly you're cooking with gas in that archetype.
Yeah, so I played that deck, like when I was playing that deck in the tournament, most of the times I was queuing it, it was, the sort of paradox my opponent would face is that they literally can't keep bouncing to me because they'll lose that deck. So I would have to play that deck into other decks that are not bounce. And basically the entire thesis of it is that I would just steal lanes with Storm plus Iron Lad plus Silk. And like, that's it. It's like, I steal lane from you. I basically, I play unfair in one lane. And the other lane, I just juggernaut you out and then try to win with like, Maximus plus Surfer or something. And
like, what if you were stealing lanes with the Storm stuff, and then also stealing lanes with Invisible Woman Shang-Chi?
No, I think it's possible. It's just like, is it so? The farther you get away from that deck, just like absolutely dismantling bounce, it's like, is it good enough that we still want to play? Because if there's ever a point in which you're playing that deck and it loses to bounce, it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, there's no point then.
You have to destroy bounce, and maybe Killmonger with Invisible Woman is enough to do that. Maybe having a Shadow King in your deck is just enough, because Shadow King is like a 250 or a 315 in that deck. Like it's nuts. But maybe that's enough. But I landed on that list progressively, right? I started out with a normal Sera list, or a normal kind of like control-y Sera list, and I just started taking out cards and just putting in more hate cards and more hate cards. And, that's how I got to this point where I was beating bounce to that 90-10 or not. So I think if we walk it back and we find a Sera deck or something, my biggest worry is that we just end up with a fair deck. And this is not a fair game. Not a fair deck.
I don't want it to be a normal Sera deck. I want it to be Sera Surfer, but with a Shang-Chi in it.
Yeah, and I think I saw you talking about it. You're gonna think about cutting the Sera too. I think that's pretty reasonable, to be honest.
I don't know if you necessarily want to cut the Sera, but I gotta tell you, I'm really down on her as a card right now. Like in terms of just being a magnet for Spider-Ham, like, oh my god, dude.
Yeah, it's funny because turn 5 wave just doesn't happen anymore, because I feel like there's like people are more aware that turn 5 wave doesn't do shit versus bounce. But if you want to talk about decks that lose to turn 5 wave, it's not bounce, it's Sera. Sera gets freaking destroyed by turn 5 wave.
Sera gets demolished. Sera, you gotta feel bad for Sera, because like it got power crept by like Darkhawk Black Bolt, right? Because like the whole concept of that list is like, what if we just played Sera and then didn't play Sera because it's better to get the discount on a stature? And then it got power crept by bounce, which is just power creeping both of them. And it's just like, man, remember when Sera was like the class of the meta? And then you think back and you're like, was that ever actually true post open beta? Has it ever actually been?
Yes, because there was a card called Silver Surfer that used to do plus.
Right.
3.
Okay. Yes. That's
a big nerf.
There we go. Okay. We found the last time Sera was good. There we go.
Yeah, that was actually the last time it was really legit, like game winning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. We talked about bounce the entire time. I was gonna Lamby. You know what? I am going to extend this a little bit and ask you one quick question that I hope ends up being quick. But Conquest did come out. I know a lot of people are trying to do infinity runs. I believe the math. I haven't checked the math myself, but the math is like for every 5-0, there's 31 losers or something like that.
Yeah, I saw
like,
it somewhere.
It's not.
What do you mean? That's very, very clear math. What are you talking about?
No, I'm saying I didn't check it. So I could. It looks clear.
It is correct.
But
like what?
If someone comes in here and is like, "This is incorrect," I'm just gonna.
It's not. That's how math works.
I wash my hands. Yeah. Anyway, Lamby, you have 4 Infinity borders. You're you're the expert on 4 decks there. So just tell people a few tips on how to potentially get that 5-0. What are some things, some sort of tactics and decks that you found have been successful in achieving that that 5-0 in Conquest?
Right. Firstly, let me say that I'm pretty sure I do not have the highest win rate in Conquest. But I have the highest win rate, one of the highest win rates, I think, on Infinite 5. Like I have never lost a single Infinite 5 game. Like if I hit Infinite 5, I always win that game because I think that game is the one that has the most stress. Like all my opponents in Infinite 5, the 4 that I've played, because I won 4-0, they all played weird as shit. Like they were so scared to play the game properly. It was so obvious, right? Like they had god hands and they were never snapping. They had like horrible hands and they were just staying because they wanted to hope for the best, that kind of thing. Like I feel like the biggest, like I'm not gonna talk about Proving Ground Silver or Gold. I'm just gonna talk straight about Infinite Conquest, right? It's relatively high stakes for the average player, correct? So I think one thing you need to remember is that the problem is I cannot give this advice because it's easy for me because I know how to handle the pressure. But I feel at the end of it, the core is you need to remember that like it's just another game of Marvel Snap. Like people that know how to play Marvel Snap, like people that have grinded Infinite, they will probably just win Infinite Conquest if they just get the pressure out of their head. So like easier said than done. Like I feel like it's really about like expectation management, pressure management, like understanding the stakes. And like this is the problem. I cannot really give you the advice because like it's really about experience. Because like if you know how to handle stress, Infinite Conquest is not difficult, right? It's just the same game of Marvel Snap that you play on ladder, just that it's in like an environment whereby you get a freaking avatar after you win the thing. So like it's the same thing. You just need to figure out a way yourself to know how to manage stress. Like everyone does it differently. I guess maybe you can think of it as like just like pretending that it's not an infinite avatar match, but like it's really depending on how you do it yourself. That's all I can say. Like you just gotta manage like the expectations and like the stress.
I'll chime in here and I'll say the stress is actually very intense for me because if I don't 5-0, I can't make a video on the deck.
Yeah.
that's so stressful because like I had the Darkhawk one, I lost an Infinite 5 with the Darkhawk deck, and I was just like, oh my god, I know this deck is good. I know I need to do a video on it. I paid 500 gold to go back in there, and I won it.
So that's the thing. That's the thing, KM. Like the fact that you have this like preconceived requirement, right? You in your mind is like, okay, 5-0 or no video. It's the same as other people. Like for other people, it's gonna be like 5-0 or no more last ticket, 5-0 or down to my last ticket, 5-0 or I wasted this ticket. Like the fact that you have this thought is what screws you over, which is the problem because I don't know how to tell you how to not have this thought, because if you care about something, you would have expectations, right? Like you cannot say that like you shouldn't think of winning because if you love the game, you will want to win. So I cannot exactly tell you that you should just not care. That is not good advice. But like I think what I can say is that in order for you to win in this kind of pressure situations, you need to figure out a way to channel the nervous. I figured it out. Yes, channel the nervous energy into the actual playing, which is like kind of what I did versus then, right? I was probably gonna lose, but instead of like worrying about what if I lose, I worried about how to win this game. And I think if you channel that nervous energy and stress into productive thoughts and not like, oh shit, no 5-0, no video, that kind of thing, then yeah, you're more likely to win.
That's absolutely correct, right? It's not that you need to not think these things. It's that you need to not think them while the game is still on. You can fucking be sad later. Like,
yeah, of course.
Like the game is still happening. It's not over.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just, it's natural to feel that stress as you get to the 5-0. It's just, you got to understand that a lot of it is a fallacy, right? I think there exist players that would go 4-1 in multiple conquests and still view that 5-0 match as in 5-0, I'm good at the game. 4-1, I'm still shit. It's just like this crazy concept where, their actual win rate is insane. insane, going 4-1 back to back to back. For some reason, because there's this little carrot on the stick that exists at the end, it's like this way to qualify that you are somewhat or in the club or you're good, which it's not, right? And it leads to stress and leads to you playing worse. One sort of tangible tip that I do, I implement in Conquest frequently because it is closed decklist, is I try to play the first few games pretty safe until I see all the cards in my opponent's deck. I do not get 8 cubed early to a tech card that I don't know about. I think that's a big trap. It's a big trap. You can play around them, right? You can play around them without explicitly seeing them, but getting into a high stakes match or even any Conquest match and going, seeing a great curve, putting a bunch of power on the board, and getting dragged into an 8 cube where your opponent has the Shang that actually wins the game, or the Shadow King, God forbid if you're playing bounce. I try to avoid those scenarios as much as possible in close deck lists. And, Lamby's talked about this on the past podcast, not in Conquest specifically, but in using those first 1 to 2 games as a way to get as much information out of your opponent as possible, which increases your sort of leverage when you're snapping in future games.
Yeah, so want to add to that. Actually, I just realized that I've been doing this very subconsciously, but I actually never really talked about it much, which is like, this is really a closed deck list strategy that I don't think people really understand is so good, which is that it's called throwing the game on purpose.
Sorry, it's just
I do this.
It's called throwing the game on purpose.
Yeah, so I do this a lot because I've played so much card games before and I know how it works. But to me, it's second nature. But let me just share a little bit about how it works. So basically, round 1, Infinite Conquest. Whatever round that you feel stressed or whatever, right? But your opponent also probably feels a little bit of stress and whatsoever. So they won't think of doing this, but if you actively think of doing it, you kind of benefit, which is if your hand is not the absolute nuts, for example, just don't play a single card. Let them play their cards. You'll be surprised how many people don't realize what's happening. You're intentionally throwing until it's too late. I've gotten up to a lot of times round 5 before they realize, oh wait, I just showed them 6 free cards. Then I'm like, all right, I just saw 6 free cards. I know your whole deck. Then the moment they snap, all right, next game. It's a real thing. People don't actively realize that they are falling for this trap because it's so counterintuitive, but it works. You can get so much free information. I've gone down to the point whereby they literally Professor X an empty lane on turn 5, and I'm like, I was waiting for that to happen, dude. I need to see the X. So 1 cube, I saw 6 cards. All right, let's go next.
Yeah, turn 4 tempo Shang-Chi, and you're like, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's a bit much, but I've done this a few times because if my hand is not the absolute nuts and I feel like I need more to extract more information, I'm just all right, let's just throw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just that's the second time this podcast you said something was and the strategy is called, and then you just describe the strategy.
Yeah. It is basically
the strategy is called throw the game on purpose. Let me explain how that works. You throw the game on purpose.
It's legal, so
yeah.
All right, I've got a strategy. It's called record a podcast. Here's how it works. We're going to record a podcast.
Yeah. Yep, and a follow-up strategy is talk about some of the lists that you could potentially use to be successful in Conquest, and those lists would be, I think all of us would recommend Bounce at this point. Bounce is a great list to potentially 5-0 in Conquest. Outside of that,
I ran one Lamby. Bounce run and 5-0'd. And then I was like, I'm not doing this again. I'm good. I know it's good. I'm going to do other stuff.
Yeah. You're creating content too, so you definitely.
Yeah, I'm good. I know this deck is good. It wasn't even close. It was just okay, well, that was great. I'm done now.
One other deck I want to put on people's radars because it's pretty decent. It can be good against Bounce. Is the Destroy deck. I know Lamby did a 5-0 with it, but that's Nova, Bucky Barnes, Carnage, Wolverine, Killmonger, Venom, Deathlock, Shuri, Nimrod, Arnim Zola, America Chavez, Destroyer. So fundamentally a Nimrod deck. And I know you talked about it, that you sort of discovered this, or the group of you discovered this while you were coming back from the Content Creator UK tournament in the car, and you're like, Nimrod's been buffed. A lot of stats, eh?
So, do you stand by this? Because I feel like I'm not going to talk about the normal things that people are talking about, right? I feel like this gets so much value out of not just the current metagame, but people not knowing what you're doing. And once they realize what you're doing, they might not adapt in time. But once you realize what's going on with Nimrod stuff, one of the things I picked out is like, if they're not shurrying into Nimrod, you're kind of not doing a lot of good things here. Like, Shuri Nimrod is very close to unbeatable a lot of the time, or at least the kind of unbeatable where you're just like never staying in against it. But I kind of wonder if the proper strategy against this deck is just like, if they're not shurrying on 4, you're snapping them. Like, there's something to it. I don't really know.
I've played this deck a lot, like, because my Discord was crazy over this deck, and apparently they were crazy over this deck for a week before I was, because like there's so many messages, sometimes I just don't notice. But there was this person in my Discord that was like, this is the nuts. They've been saying it for weeks and no one listens to them. Then only when Lamby starts to look at it and they're like, oh my god, it's the nuts. But like this person in Discord actually has been talking about it. And like, so I picked this deck up, I played it a lot. My whole Discord was crazy about it for like the last 2 days. The deck is quite sick versus bounce. Okay, I still think bounce is inevitably the best deck, but like this deck has quite a sick bounce matchup because bounce has no way to interact with the Nimrod stuff. Like the thing is, you can play it like,
but like if you're the bounce player, don't you just snap the second they don't play Shuri? Because you're gonna go taller than non-Shuri Nimrod.
Yeah, correct. So someone in my Discord again came out with this ideology, and I think it's perfectly correct. Right, this Nimrod deck is quite literally Thanos Lockjaw. You don't draw that curve, you just leave. You don't draw that curve, you just leave.
Yeah.
It's that deck. It's really that deck, just that it's only 12 cards. But like, because if you draw that hand, you draw Shuri Nimrod, there's like freaking 4 or 5 destroy effects in the deck. So like, if you draw Shuri Nimrod, you just beat bounce. They have 0 ways to interact with all the 12 stuff flying around. And like, you go like, okay, sometimes you even have a Wolverine there. So like, for example, you do Wolverine on 2, turn 3, you don't really care. Shuri, Nimrod, and then like, final turn, just go like Deathlock Carnage, or even better, Venom Carnage. You just win because it's 12 times 4, and then Venom is the Venom. And then like, there's like some other stuff on the board as well. So it's a lot. Like, it's very difficult for bounce to allocate efficiently into all that. And also, this one is a bit of a spoiler, but like our version 2.0 that we've been working on is leaning super hard into the whole, this one's not on Twitter yet, like, but like it will be on there soon. But like, we are leaning even harder into the whole Nimrod or Bust strat, which is like, we are playing Iron Lad right now, because Iron Lad is a second Nimrod. And even
it's also
Psylocke,
a second Shuri. Oh god.
And even, so Psylocke's literally leaning super hard into the thing, which is Psylocke Shuri Led. That's the god curve, right? Psylocke Shuri Led hit Nimrod GG, right? We lean super hard into that right now, and it works. It's just that you need to have the ideology that like, you don't hit it, leave. You don't hit it, leave. Yeah, this is going up on Twitter, hopefully before your video goes up. But yeah, very soon.
I feel that's exactly where, like, once you start playing Psylocke, you lose me every time. Like, that is a consistent thing. Like, every time any deck, like, Willows did it, he was like, we're doing Psylocke, so we get out an early Black Bolt or whatever. It's like, no, I'm out. I'm so out here. I'm not playing that card. I refuse.
It's just because this deck really wants to do one thing only. Like okay, so hear me out again. We actually even cut Bucky from the deck because Bucky clogs the lane. That's how all in we are with the whole like Nimrod or Bust strat, and it works. It works.
That's so heinous. Yeah. I mean, you're what? What's the odds for a 2-card? Actually, the odds for a 2-card combo with Chavez, I can actually pull those up. I have those. I have that bookmarked. Hold on.
Can I hit you with some Theorycrafting real quick while I pull that up? I think that if one card I think that might increase your bounce matchup for a few reasons, actually Galactus, because bounce plays around not having priority, which plays around your Killmonger, and Galactus is very good against decks that don't have priority because their cards don't flip, and your Galactus is a 6/7, the solo card in the lane, and now you have to be ahead for it to actually do its effect. So you will be, right? Because the cards will be upside down. And you can play the Galactus, and you've already Shuri Nimrod, and you'll likely win those lanes. So I mean, you go Galactus, double Nimrod, and now you can have some sort of top end, which is potentially something like it could literally be anything, as the 4 spot in that lane. I think that it would actually increase your equity in the bounce matchup as some sort of top end. Not a card you have to play, but I'd argue like destroy. Yeah, I mean,
I'm actually
you could maybe do it.
I think that actually makes the deck more enticing to me if we actually have a Galactus in there.
Yeah, so the funny thing is, there's someone in my Discord that's also preaching that right now. But like once again, it takes Lamby like 2 weeks to listen to you. So like he's been saying that for a while, and like the fact that you guys both like actually think that it's good, I probably need to tell him that. He's probably gonna like pee his pants or something. Like
I just like I think like I'm not sure he thinks it's good, but like suddenly it's like imagine having to play against this shit where you have to play again around, like they go anything into Nimrod, and you have to play around Galactus, but you also have to play around Venom and Deathlock. And it's like, I don't know how you do that.
Like we are already, I mean, like the build that we are settling on, like further on, like we already have lead, we maybe have Psylocke, so like it kind of fits with having Galactus, right? If you think about it.
Yeah,
like
it's really
turn four Galactus with lead is another high roll if it's not a Nimrod, and then like if it's versus Bounce, they have one lane to play, you probably still win. So
I don't know.
I don't think that I also don't think that Bounce can retreat, because Bounce goes for the turn 6 point slam. They don't have priority because they're playing things like Kitty, and you have Shuri Nimrod, and it could be Shuri Nimrod into Venom, Deathlock. It could be so many different things, even Destroyer. But instead, you play Galactus. Now you
Bounce should leave if you play Shuri. Like if you
if we
Nimrod, you are out of there every time.
Yes.
yeah.
But,
okay, but can I just say that also, like I know we are like I was, and a lot of us like in my Discord are hyping this deck super hard, but the truth is it is nowhere as consistent as Bounce. No matter how good the matchup is, if you hit the nuts, you gotta hit the nuts first, and like hitting the nuts is not as consistent as you think. So
okay, so
until we add Galactus.
Like, this is like an asterisk on your tweet where you were like the new meta breaker.
It is a meta breaker because we tested the. Okay, I didn't put a description down in the post because I was planning to post the 2.0 very soon already. We had some like hiccups, but like the Jane Jaw and the Bounce matchup is not difficult at all. We realized that it's actually quite free if you just draw the Shuri Nimrod. You draw Shuri Nimrod, right? Both matchups are free, like super free.
But
so
that's
like
they
I didn't
don't
put an
realize that yet. Like those matchups are free because they don't know that they're gonna die. Right? So
no, but even if they know, like they see Shuri, they see Nimrod, and you go double destroy on the final turn, it's too much points. They can't do anything.
They're not leaving, and they should be leaving. And you're like getting double equity out of that now. Right? It's like they don't know that you're actually going to beat them, right? Like it's like the Wave stuff, right? Like Wave used to beat Bounce because people didn't know what to do against it. And I feel like that's what I mean when I talk about like this deck getting value out of it. It's like people are staying when they should be. They don't. When you see Shuri and Nimrod, it doesn't look like something you should respect, but it's like the most horrifying goddamn thing on earth.
Yeah. Also,
so
this deck has a very, very short shelf life because it's the most easily counterable shit ever.
Cosmo armor,
armor is not real. No one.
Yeah, like if this is ever a meta thing, it takes about less than 24 hours for it to be not meta again. So like I don't know if people would like. I mean, if people respect this deck, then you'll see more armor in Cosmo. But like, I mean, the funny thing is like you just play a Shuri deck, you beat this deck because they have armor. So like.
Yeah, you also
it's a very
Spider-Ham
with regards to
in the matchup. Like, don't you get a little bit farmed by Spider-Ham?
It's not that bad because the thing is, you get farmed by Ham if you don't have Zola or Destroyer in hand. In fact, like if they do it on my Destroyer, I don't really care. But like very often you do have one of your 6s in your hand in a 12 card deck, and like. Okay, if it hits Nimrod, you leave. But like, if it doesn't hit Nimrod, you hit Zola, it kind of sucks. But you have like 3 other destroy effects. You hit Destroyer, it's not actually a bad thing, to be honest.
It's 615.
So yeah, it's okay. Ham is okay.
I'm so excited. There's like maybe secretly a Galactic under the surface here. You know, Cam,
Cam and I perked up when he was like, "Oh, we could put Galactus in here." He's like, "Oh,
you could." Actually,
speaking of me. Speaking of me having to defend positions that I don't actually hold on Twitter, me and KM did a podcast where we talked about the Galactus issue back before it got nerfed, and people were really pissed about it. And to have a discussion, you have to take one side and the other side. So I took pro Galactus, and Cam, I get tagged in so many pro Galactus things on Twitter, so many lists and like all this stuff. And like, I love Galactus. I actually do love Galactus. No, like, but it's like,
I like Green Up Galactus a lot as well.
I was one of the first few people to say that like this would be the nuts battle mode that if we could figure it out. But like 4 months later, then we did. So,
you were when Braude won, you were the person who suggested it first because we were talking about how it had to either be Bounce or Galactus, and you were just like, you should be the Galactus player. And then we like
if you actually check the Scream Squad Discord, I suggested it.
Oh my god!
In February as well.
You leaked the name. We're screwed.
It's a secret Discord.
Yeah. But actually back in February, I was like, if people cannot beat Galactus in battle mode, it just wins. But like, no one figured out the build until like 4 months later. But like,
I mean, Galactus was actually genuinely impossible to build for a really long time. Like people were just doing awful stuff. Like, and also like, you say 4 months later, but it's like 2 of those months were taken up with where Arrow was in every deck and Galactus was playable.
True.
So it's like, it really was like, it only took like a couple
Mm-hmm.
months, right? Like maybe a couple weeks even before we got to like things that were close, right? Because like Revis, about like a month after the Arrow nerf, I want to say. Maybe a little bit after, like he hit it, right? Like once Arrow was gone, this was, in my opinion, inevitable. Like I was talking about how like if they nerf Arrow, Galactus is going to be an issue pretty quickly before they nerfed Arrow. And wow, crazy! It's crazy how the card that like seems custom built to beat Galactus going out of every deck in the meta makes it so that Galactus shows up more. That's weird.
It actually makes perfect sense, though.
I know.
He's being facetious.
I just realized.
He's like, you know what, Cam?
Cam, that actually, you're good point.
We call this the I disagree with you.
We should be nice to Lamby though. Because Lamby, how many hours have you been awake right now?
Dude, like close to 20, I think.
All right, we're calling it. Go to bed.
Yeah,
we're calling it. Have a good one. You're calling to bed.
I want to thank you, Lamby, for coming on the podcast. I said, I mean, it was a joy to record. Like, our plan for this podcast was absolutely not about Masterclass, but I genuinely believe that's what the podcast became. Like, this is just an amazing piece of, suite of information. If you're interested in Voucher, looking to pick up the deck, and, you're interested in what we all think is the best deck in Marvel Snap right now, I think that Lamby is an absolute master of that list, and really gave us a lot of knowledge here. So thank you so much for coming on once again, a returning guest. I think it's our first returning guest.
It is. So, you're the first one
Lamby with the feature hat trick. But for everybody listening, what are you up to? What are your socials? Where can they find you? Your stream schedule, etc.
Right. So, firstly, you can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/LambyseriesGG, and then also on Twitch at twitch.tv/LambyseriesTV. I stream Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and a weekend about 10 a.m. EST. And also, I have a YouTube with Coco4, The Competitive Age. We do something very similar to what you guys are doing here, just that maybe a bit more like targeted at specific like decks and stuff. So thank you guys for having me on this pod again. And I feel like what Brandon said makes a lot of sense. Like this is not just a bounce like masterclass discussion. I feel like we talked a lot about deck building theories, tournament like ideology and stuff like that. In general it's a relatively try hard-ish podcast based on what we've talked about and heard, but like this is good. I enjoyed myself talking about this with you guys a lot about this, and maybe we can do the hat trick in the future.
I mean, talking about the 2-time, I mean, you might become the 2-time draft champion too. You might end up as the 2-time champion of draft, and I'll end up as the 2-time guy who commentated it. Let's go.
Resulting in the real reward, which is the three-time guest on the Snapshot. So we did have a review come in this week. This comes in from Big Show 2569. Said, been listening for months now and really enjoy your content. The episode with Molt was amazing. Getting Cam and Molt together was fantastic. I've become a much better Snap player, and from the things I've heard on the podcast, I love the game, and you've added a lot to that with your content. Highly recommend listening for anyone who plays. Thank you for all you do. Well, thank you for the 5-star review. If you're listening to this podcast, you've been listening for a while. If you like this episode, if you like having Lamby on, well, the number one thing you can do for us is leave us a 5-star review. It helps immensely. And to do that, you can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or you can go to ratethispodcast.com/snapshot, and it will aggregate all those links for you. There's a video version of this podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/@the_snapshot. Hopefully this week it actually is video. Once again, I'm recording from a freaking hotel room, so we'll see in the post-production. But heading over to the YouTube channel, hit us with that like and subscribe. We're only sitting at 1,400 subscribers. People accuse us of criminally under advertising the podcast. We try our hardest.
It is true. I often get like, why didn't you tell me about the podcast? Just like it's everywhere. It's all over my socials.
Yeah. Well, I have good news that you can help us, and the way you can do that is by subscribing to the channel and telling your friends about it. Don't keep all these goodies to yourself. We're all on Twitter. I'm at Brendan APG, KM is KM Best MS, and Lambyseries is at Lambyseries GG. KM, your Twitch schedule.
Great question. My Twitch schedule is 6 p.m. and then the days are question mark. Most days. It's 6 p.m. Eastern whenever I'm not like dead tired because I stayed up until 5 a.m. playing Marvel Snap. I understand that's very stupid because like, oh, you're a content creator, you should play on stream. Well, I don't, and I'm stupid. Okay. All right. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome literally anytime.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.